Well, hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another edition of the Independent Thinker Podcast. I know I've been away a little bit. A lot of things have been happening, um, personal stuff. So I'm not going to drag it out. I really want to do this podcast real quick, very quick one. Next week, I'm going to get back into the rhythm of what I normally would like to talk about, which is politics and education in particular. But I really want to talk about this. It's been on my heart for a little bit, and I want to make sure that I'm very clear about something. I am going to talk to you, excuse me, in the capacity of just Donald H. Broussard Jr., not as an educational consultant, not as a speech and debate coach, teacher, and consultant. I'm not going to talk to you in the perspective of uh, my fraternity that I'm a part of, or my social fraternity um, outside of the D9. I'm not going to talk to you in any of that nature. I'm not going to represent them. I'm only going to represent me. And I really want to talk to you all about an issue here at home in Louisiana. Excuse me. I sat back a bit to really examine the effects of not voting. And what I mean by that is the perspective that we as individuals normally vote for candidates who we feel would represent us as individuals as well as represent our family, our children, if we have any, and our community. At least the socially responsible voters out there. Whether you are in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, Washington, Hawaii, New York, Florida, who cares? If you're a socially responsible individual and you vote on, and not just every 4 years, I mean literally vote, right? Vote for in special elections, for special amendments that comes out that specifically affects us. Those are the individuals I'm talking. But I also have an issue with people who don't vote. And excuse me for saying this. My mother's going to be watching this. I'm sorry, mom. um, People who don't vote, but still always bitch and complain about stuff that's happening in their own communities, and they don't do anything about it. In particular, the voting. More so than ever, those same people who bitch and complain about things that are happening against them in the community who don't vote and openly admits they don't vote also don't go out in the community and do things that's worthwhile, like volunteer at a nursing home or volunteer with a school district to go ahead and provide tutoring services to young kids, even high school kids that are in desperate need of tutoring services, or going out to clean the community, right? Or gather people to make effective change for the community. Those are the same people who I also have a problem with because they always bitch and complain about stuff, but come up with no solutions. And this is where it brings me to. So I had a conversation with a couple of people in Louisiana. I'm not going to name their names or anything of that nature, but these were people in New Orleans. my home away from home. I was born in Lafayette, Louisiana, but technically I was kind of raised in New Orleans. Right? I call New Orleans home. I know NOLA at the back of my hand. I met some of my best friends, people I can literally say best friends. I can call them now and say I need your help, and they're there for me. Those are the type of people I have. I say that because those individuals who I spoke to in New Orleans who claim they're irritated with what's going on in the state legislature with our governor, Jeff Landry, and the laws that has been put in place, they were complaining and complaining and complaining. And I'm trying to have a civilized conversation with them. Like, okay, I don't like what's going on, but tell me specifically what you don't like. Couple of things. All five of them, five, stated almost in unison, even though I didn't vote for this MFer, I had to stop him. I literally had to stop him because as soon as they said that, my blood was boiling. Here's my problem. Bitch and complain that you have an issue with Jeff Landry when you didn't even go out to vote. You didn't even have the gumption to get off your lazy ass to go ahead and vote. But you're the loudest ones out here complaining. But you are also the same individuals who complain about other people complaining when they don't have the privileges than you do. Now, this should enrage many of you. But if you don't know what I'm talking about in regards of the rules and the laws that the Louisiana state legislature has put into place and pushed this agenda by Jeff Landry, because keep in mind, there is a supermajority here in Louisiana for obvious reasons. I don't know, gerrymandering, for instance. Let me explain. Jeff Landry specifically went out to a campaign. It wasn't a very good campaign, but he didn't need to have a good campaign because he knew and realized that the DNC in Louisiana is just, it's a malfunction. Let's go that route. But I digress. One of his first pillars, as he stated, if and when he becomes governor, was to tackle the crime in Louisiana. I will grant to you there are some significant issues of crime in Louisiana. But when you compare per capita the crime rate and compare that to other states, we are almost, I say, mid pack. And a lot of the crime that happens in a very concentrated area. And so I did some research and I realized where the crime is truly happening. So, with this research, an individual um, also had similar research that's out there, and he talked about this. The Where the crime rate is high in every state, or where an individual or the aggregate credit score is between 500 and 515. Let me repeat, the credit rate within that community, within that area, within certain sections where it's abnormally high are credit scores between 500 and 515. And basically, it goes even further. There's a good high crime rate from that 515 to 535, and of course that 535, 536, excuse me, to 575. So there's high credit rates basically within the 500 score, but particularly when you hone in 500 to 550. Now, why is that? I'm glad you asked. The reason why is that way is because in every single neighborhood within that radius of that 500 to 515 credit score, you have an abnormally high amount of check cashing places, cash advance spots, dilapidated homes, tore down communities with poor, poorly structured schools that have been basically destroyed and lambasted. You have significant police officers rolling through with a specific purpose of not to maintain order, but those very few, and I will say this, those very few bad acting cops pretty much raising the tensions. Why do I bring this up? Because Jeff Landry's bills or Jeff Landry proposed, pushed ideas to be placed in bills in order to be passed by the supermajority in both the House and the Senate in Louisiana to get passed and for him to sign immediately focuses in on those particular areas. Essentially, what happened is that there are 8 recently passed bills, including legislation that will treat, listen to this, all, not few, not half, but all 17-year-old who commit crimes as adults with harsher penalties for carjackings. That was signed mid-January. It didn't go into effect until the start of February. Now, this is the spurn on the violent crime supposedly that's happening within Louisiana cities, in particular, those areas where the aggregate credit score is 500 to 515 with dilapidated communities, unstructured, with check cashing centers, cash advance centers, and so on and so forth, are there. Within 2 weeks, this bill was created, drawn up, debated, passed, and signed. 2 weeks. They also, within those 2 weeks, passed a slew of policies that will literally overhaul elements of the state criminal justice system. Now, let me take in the 17-year-old perspective. If a 17-year-old is with his so-called friends, I'll put in quotation marks, his so-called friends, and he is part of a carjacking, Let's say he knows he's going to be a part of this carjacking, right? And the only thing he does is do the watch out and he climbs into the car. He is no longer an accessory to it. Keep this in mind. He's not no longer an accessory, which normally you would be what? An accessory. No, 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 no. You are now part of that carjacking. You're no longer accessory. So what happens? This 17-year-old kid is part of this. He gets charged. He's tried as an adult. He gets sentenced to prison, more likely Angola. But let's just say it's not Angola. Where would he go? I'm glad you asked. Any for profit prison. But what's worse than this? Let me rephrase that. What's equally as bad as this is where he signed the bill. You may be thinking to yourself, well, Louisiana, the capital city is Baton Rouge, so obviously he signed the bill in Baton Rouge. No, he didn't. He purposefully, with willful intent, happily rode his butt down to New Orleans to sign this bill for a particular reason, to show his dominance to a group of people, knowing that in certain sections of New Orleans, you have that aggregate 500 to 515 credit range with a whole bunch of dilapidated homes and schools that went down specifically because of Hurricane Katrina and never rose back up again. With check cashing centers, cash advance centers that perpetually put individuals, not just black folk, not just Hispanic folk, but white folk also, in perpetual debt to the point where they can't get out of their own way. They can't raise their head above sea level. That that says something about the person and the character you are. But let me tie this into what I said earlier. It also shows the character of those individuals who decided to sit on their asses and not vote. Not vote at all. But you're complaining. You're complaining. And it bothers me. I mean, it's irritating. It literally makes no sense whatsoever. You had a candidate who was the former, or now the former Secretary of Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development. He is one of those individuals who brought in millions of dollars into Louisiana to fix roads, bridges, to fix neighborhoods and communities, specifically for those cities who specifically act for that money in grants that the DNC put up. Now, 5 months before the election, but I digress. They had literally 4 debates on television in Louisiana. Jeff Landry went to the first one and never went to the rest of them because he realized, why am I going to waste my time? I'm going to win. You just introduced a candidate to DNC 5 months prior to the election. I'm going to set my agenda. I'm going to be as cool as possible. And I'm going to skip every single debate there happens to be. And I promise you, those same five guys, not the restaurant, those same five guys who I spoke with, who I had a debate with, a heated debate about the laziness of not voting, yet the vigor of debating the integrity of the governor. This is what you get. It is important to understand where I'm coming from. Voting has consequences. You can't come to me and tell me, well, my vote won't count. It won't move the needle. Says who? Let me break it down a little bit further. Okay. All right. If New Orleans, if the voters in New Orleans, which is a heavy blue district, if the voters in New Orleans, in the New Orleans area, would, if only 15% more voted in Shreveport, if about 15 to 17% more voted, let's use Lafayette, which is very red, by the way, but there's still a lot of Democrats there. Calcasieu Parish, which is Lake Charles area, and the Alexandria, Louisiana area, which is quite red, but there's some blue specks here and there. If just those areas had another 10 to 15% voting in the runoff, in the initial race, the Honorable Sean Wilson, Dr. Sean Wilson, that is, would have won that race. In second place would have been Jeff Landry, and you would have had a runoff. And you see what happens is that if you have a runoff, right? If you have a runoff, Jeff Landry has to debate more. Jeff Landry has to be on that stage every single debate and debate his policies and his perspective on every controversial thing he has to talk about. He has in his mind everything. And now that can't happen for obvious reasons, right? He won. See, in Louisiana, like much states, if he gets 50.1% of the vote, no matter how many candidates there are, there's no runoff. He is automatically the governor. Election has consequences. By the way, you had 2 weeks of absentee balloting you could have done as well. I mean, it's mind boggling. It's legitimately mind boggling. Now, allow me to go a little bit further in regards of the Republicans' bill through the vision of Jeff Landry. Indulge me for a second. Thank you. With this, during Landry's quote unquote ceremonial bill signing in New Orleans, he also gave his seal of approval to legislation that makes certain juvenile criminal records public and funding for a new Louisiana State Police contingent in New Orleans and a measure that gives law enforcement officers qualified immunity from liability. Let's break this down a little bit further. Okay, I'm gonna be real quick about this. One, the reason why juvenile records are sealed or the is basically for the maturity of the child and for any other law officer or any other company won't be able to hold what a minor has done in his or her life, even though he or she or they changed their life for the better. I give you a perfect example. When I was younger, like in my late teens, early 20s, I had an opportunity to work for a company that sold athletic gear. Right? It was called Finish Line. Now, I had a pretty good job as a kid who literally just got out of college. You know, I was 20, was kind of in a rut, right? I got my degree. I'm trying to figure things out. I moved back to Louisiana after my personal opinion, the greatest HBCU in the land, Alabama Agricultural and Mechanical University. I come home to Louisiana and I have an interview with the Finish Line. The Finish Line wanted to hire me, but the one thing they did was they went into my background and they did a credit check. Credit check wasn't all that great, but I passed it. Whatever that passing score happened to be, I did that. My background was fine because they didn't have to go into my juvenile record because I was an idiot when I was in high school, a straight up idiot. Now, they offered the job to me, but 2 days earlier, I got a better position. So I had to decline. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking to myself, you did a full background check. If my if they went into my past, which was me being a stupid, idiotic teenager going through high school, trying to maneuver my way into this abyss, I would have never gotten that job. Matter of fact, I wouldn't have gotten the job that I accepted 2 days prior to the offer from Finish Line. That is super important. You can't hold the past against people when they change their life. You just can't. This is not a marriage where you cheat on someone and they find out, hello, you're going to get a divorce or your girlfriend or your boyfriend's going to get rid of your butt. It's not that. Not even close. Now you're bringing up an event or events that was traumatizing to that young child when he or she or they was a child. Now they're an adult. That's bringing back more trauma because now they can get that job that they so desired over a period of time. They put their heart and soul into it. What are you doing? You are damaging people even further. Then it leads me to the perspective of funding for new Louisiana State Police contingent in New Orleans. The key word is contingent. He wants a police force in Louisiana that is similar to his ideology, his perspective, and we don't even know specifically what is his ideology and perspective. That could literally harm the lives of black and brown faces and even poor white faces, especially within New Orleans and Jefferson Parish, where you have a large contingent of Hispanic and Asian American people who are living just at their means, maybe a little bit below. You harming them because you don't know what the perspective or the purpose or the mission of this contingent New Orleans force under the regime and the ideology and the perspective of Jeff Landry. Now you can go back into his history, Jeff Landry history, and you can determine what is his ideology and perspective. I advise you to do your own research on that one. It's interesting. It's this is destructive. But then it goes one further. As I said before, he's going to provide a measure within the law that provides qualified immunity from liability. Allow me to explain this situation for you. Every If you know the story about Philandro Castile in Minnesota, the gentleman was with his kid in the back seat and his wife, black guy, white guy, or I think it was white or a mixed guy, white Asian guy, whatever it is, came, traffic stop. Philandro Castile specifically said, "Hey, I have a gun in my car," with his hand on the wheel. "Can I go over and open the glove compartment so you can see it? Because I have a license to carry." As soon as he said that, the police officer shot the guy multiple times in front of his wife, in front of his kid. Question: where is he now? It's Geronimo Yanez is the police officer who killed, assassinated a harmless, law abiding individual. And I said that he was probably mixed or Asian or back. I'm sorry, he has Hispanic descent, Hispanic background. Everything was caught on his camera. And he killed this man, assassinated this man, ruined the life of his wife, but more importantly, his baby in the back seat, who's going to have lifelong trauma. By the way, you know what happened to him after he was charged with second-degree manslaughter and 2 counts of dangerous discharge of a firearm? You know what he got? Not guilty. Welcome to qualified immunity perspective. You really gonna do that? Now, I get it. Qualified immunity perspective, they won't be liable for the wrongful death of so on and so forth. Guess what? If that's the case, any police officer, you're gonna give them an a blank slate, especially the very few. And I'm going to say it over and over and over again because I have family and friends who are part of the police force. Very, very, very few of these so-called police officers who are rotten to the core. You're going to give them carte blanche to do anything they want to do. If you don't know what was going on in New Orleans in the 90s, when it comes to the police force, do the research. If you thought those cops were bad, you won't see anything yet. Now, This should enrage people, but unfortunately, it's not getting enough traction within Louisiana, much less the United States. And I get it. There's other things that are happening in the United States. You got Trump doing all these things, 91 counts. You got Judge Cannon, who's in the pocket of Trump, who is quite frankly not qualified to be a judge in the first darn place. You still got Trump, who cheated on his wife while pregnant to get with Stormy Daniels. I mean, the same guy who took a whole bunch of classified documents and put it in the shitter and showed it off to people all across the world. I mean, I get it. And then you have the election, and it's not the most popular election. Then you got a whole bunch of people who don't like Biden for whatever reason. And I get it. He's an old guy who's part of the establishment. You got a you got Trump, who's an orange guy, who is not part of the establishment, but it has this ability, this gift of gab to con people. I get it. People don't like the choices we have. I understand. We got our mind on other things. You know, pay. How can we pay bills and the gas prices are fluctuating on almost on a weekly basis. We're trying to have a budget so we can live in a comfortable manner. I get that. I understand that. I grasp that perspective. But in Louisiana, it's important because it specifically affects everyone in the state. And even those individual students who may be coming from across the world or the United States, coming and descending upon Louisiana. Whether you're going to a PWI school like a LSU, University of Louisiana Lafayette, University of Louisiana Monroe, a Tulane, a Louisiana Tech, all the way to HBCUs of the Xavier University of Louisiana, the Dillard Universities, the Southern Universities, Grambling State Universities, SUNO, Southern University of New Orleans. Doesn't matter what it is. They ascend to Louisiana. They have to abide by these rules that's set forth by a supermajority in the mind of a power hungry governor. On top of that, by the way, Landry signed several bills that toughen penalties for certain crimes, including a minimum of 25 years in jail in case where someone distributes, distributes fentanyl in a way that appeals to children, such as the shape, the color, the taste, or packaging design. What the hell is that? Like, what's an example of someone who is going to come up with fentanyl and put it in a Reese's peanut butter cup packaging? Like, who's going to come up with a design of fentanyl that looks like a rose or a lily? I mean, I understand you want to be tough when it comes to crime on that particular perspective. I can understand being tough on the crime. I'd rather you be sensible. Like, you can do two things at one time. Like walk and chew gum. You know, you can do that. You can be sensible yet still tough. I just it doesn't make any sense. He also expands the death penalty execution methods. He's literally bringing back the gas chamber and the electric chair. Oh, okay. I'm going to purposefully leave the name of this person because I respect him. I respect his son because I grew up with his son. I know his son. There's a gentleman who passed away several years ago because he was convicted. I'm sorry, he was charged, convicted, and sentenced to death for killing a police officer. He was electrocuted. Not only was he electrocuted, he was electrocuted, I'll put in quotations, violently. In other words, when he was electrocuted, they were pronounced this individual dead. Literally, a minute or two later, his heart started pumping again, and he almost like he had a jolt of electricity, pardon the pun, and woke up again, trying to get out of the chair. They electrocuted him at least twice, if not three times, to the point where his head caught on fire and burnt. That was the last time someone was electrocuted in Louisiana. I went to my friend's father's funeral with my now late grandfather. My grandfather and my late great aunt, with several other St. Anthony ushers and lady auxiliaries to say the novena, the rosary, excuse me, for him and the family. Man, I sat with the dude. I sat with my friend. You bringing that back? Oh, by the way, let's bring back the gas chamber. Oh, that's really fun. That's really, really fun. Let's do that. I mean, what are we doing? Now, I'm not saying if, look, I'm the first person to tell you, right? If someone harms my family, my close ones, I want to put that out there. My close family, I want to torture them myself. I do. But, but I'm also somewhat humane. You bringing back all these torturous perspectives for what? To show power? You don't even give a reason at all. It's it makes zero sense. But there are still people in Louisiana who are still complaining and bitching because they don't like the governor. They don't like what he's doing. They don't like their own representatives in the House or senators in the state Senate who create the laws that we technically abide by in the state more so than on the federal level. But we have this notion that we need to go out and vote specifically for federal elections, not for state or city elections. Excuse me. Now, I'm going to close it up this way. We have to do better. We have to want better. We have to desire better. Sorry. When there is an election that's happening, we have to vote. Not every 4 years, every damn election. We have to be as purposeful as possible. We have to vote as if our life depends on it. Because in many instances, in many situations, it does. I hope this touches the soul of someone here. Let's do better. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Independent Thinker podcast. Be well, be blessed. One love.